The first thing my wife lost that night was not my love. It was the voting power she never realized had been borrowed. The ballroom at the Harrington Hotel glowed like a magazine cover. All gold light, white tablecloths, polished silverware, and champagne glasses lined up like little trophies waiting to be claimed. Outside, downtown Chicago was locked in a hard November cold, the kind that makes the windows look black and endless. But inside, everything was warm, expensive, and staged. Cameras flashed near the Step and Repeat banner for Vantage Pearl Media's 10th anniversary gala. Reporters smiled. Investors shook hands. Executives laughed too loudly at jokes that were not funny. And my wife, Vanessa Caldwell, stood at the center of it all in a white designer dress, glowing beneath the lights like she had built the room with her bare hands. Maybe that was the lie she loved most. I sat near the back, at a round table beside people who barely looked at me, wearing a navy suit I had owned for 6 years and a wedding ring I had worn for 14. Nobody asked why the founder's husband was seated so far from the stage. Nobody had to. In Vanessa's world, placement was language, and that table told the whole room exactly what she thought I was worth. A decoration. A reminder from an earlier chapter. A man useful enough to stand beside her in old photos, but not important enough to mention under bright lights. I watched her accept the Crystal Award while Chad Mercer, her chief operating officer, clapped from the front row with that easy grin men wear when they believe the future already belongs to them. The host leaned into the microphone and asked Vanessa who she wanted to thank most for her journey. That should have been harmless. A soft question. A polished answer. She could have said her team, her mentors, her late father. She could have said anything. Instead, her eyes drifted across the room until they found me. For 1 second, the noise faded. Forks stopped. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. Vanessa smiled, not warmly, not nervously, but with the clean confidence of someone about to make a private wound public. Then she said, "Not him. He disgusts me." The room did not explode. That would have been easier. It froze first. A strange, airless silence rolled across the tables, heavy enough to bend my shoulders if I had let it. Then Chad laughed. One sharp breath through his nose, then a full laugh, and after that, a few others joined because powerful people often teach weaker people when to laugh. I looked at Vanessa. She did not look sorry. She looked relieved, like she had finally said out loud what she had been practicing in mirrors for years. My hand moved before my anger did. I twisted the ring once. Twice. The gold was warm from my skin. 14 years reduced to a small circle and a pale mark on my finger. I placed it on the white napkin beside my untouched bourbon. No speech. No scene. No desperate question. Just the soft sound of metal touching linen. Vanessa's smile flickered. Only for a second. But I saw it. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked past the tables while the cameras kept blinking at the stage behind me. At the ballroom doors, I took out my phone and sent Marcus Reed 4 words. Start the transfer now. By midnight, the shares Vanessa had bragged about for years would no longer answer to her name. I stepped out of the ballroom into a hallway lined with black marble and tall windows that reflected a man I almost did not recognize. The music behind the doors kept playing, muffled and elegant, as if nothing important had happened. That was how Vanessa's world worked. Pain stayed outside the frame. Embarrassment was edited out. The camera always found the good side. I walked past a table of gift bags stamped with the Vantage Pearl Media logo and remembered the first version of that logo, printed crooked on cheap business cards in our apartment 12 years earlier. Back then, Vanessa worked from a folding desk beside the kitchen, wearing sweatpants and ambition, calling boutique brands until her voice went rough. I had a job in financial systems then, a quiet one, the kind nobody at a gala respects because it does not sparkle under chandeliers. I built risk models, cleaned up broken balance sheets, and understood numbers the way some men understand engines. I was never loud about it. My father used to say that real stability did not need applause. It just needed to hold when the weather turned. So I held. When Vanessa needed a ride to investor meetings, I drove. When she cried over rejected pitches at 2 in the morning, I made coffee and sat beside her while she rebuilt the deck slide by slide. When payroll came up short, I moved money from my own accounts and told her it was temporary because pride is easier to protect when you call sacrifice a bridge. She used to look at me like I was part of the dream. Not the whole dream. Not the shining part. But part of it. Those were the years when dinner meant takeout containers on the floor and laughter echoing against walls we could barely afford to paint. We measured success in small things. A client saying yes. A bill paid before the late fee. A Saturday morning where neither of us checked email for 1 full hour. Then the company grew. The office moved from a shared workspace to a full floor on Wacker Drive. Her clothes changed first, then her friends, then her voice when she said my name in public. Ethan became my husband, and then he is not really in the business. And finally, on nights when wine and applause made her careless, he would not understand. I told myself it was stress. I told myself success changes the room around a person, not the person. That was a kind lie. The truth was simpler. Vanessa had started believing the story people told about her. Self-made, fearless, untouchable. And the quieter I stayed, the easier it became for her to mistake silence for emptiness. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed once. Marcus had replied. 3 words. Understood. Beginning now. I stood beneath the glass canopy while the wind came off the river sharp enough to sting my face. Upstairs, my wife was probably smoothing over the moment with charm and champagne. Downstairs, I felt the first clean breath I had taken in years. The car waiting outside the Harrington belonged to a Blacktown car service Vanessa used for donors, board members, and people she wanted to impress. I almost laughed when the driver opened the door for me, because even that small courtesy felt borrowed from her version of success. I gave him the address of a motel near O'Hare instead of our house in Lincoln Park. He glanced once in the mirror, maybe noticing the missing ring. Maybe noticing the way I kept my left hand folded closed like it still held something fragile. I watched Chicago slide by in strips of glass, brick, and winter light. The river looked dark beneath the bridges. Office towers glowed above us like stacked aquariums full of people working late, people chasing numbers, people believing the name on the door meant they owned the room. Vanessa believed that too. She believed Vantage Pearl Media was hers because the magazine said it was hers. She believed the shares in her account were proof of power. She believed a man who did not correct her in public had nothing left to correct. But 8 years earlier, Vantage Pearl had been 96 hours from missing payroll. I remember the exact number because Vanessa wrote it on a yellow legal pad with a shaking hand. 96 hours. 32 employees. $218,000 needed by Friday at 5 o'clock. Her biggest client had delayed payment. Her bank had refused another line of credit. 2 investors had walked away after smiling through lunch and promising to circle back. That phrase still tastes like dust to me. Circle back. It means no, but with clean teeth. That night, Vanessa sat at our kitchen table in an old Northwestern sweatshirt, staring at spreadsheets like they were lab results. She thought I was upstairs sleeping. I was not. I was in the spare bedroom on a call with Marcus Reed, who at the time was not my lawyer as much as the only man who knew how much money I had kept quiet. My grandfather had left me land outside Madison, Wisconsin, commercial parcels nobody in my family cared about until a medical campus expanded beside them. I sold at the right time, reinvested better than anyone expected, and built Caldwell Silent Trust for one reason: privacy. I did not want a life where every conversation came with a price tag. Vanessa knew I had some investments. She did not know I had enough to save her company without putting my name on the press release. That was my mistake. Love can make secrecy feel noble. I told Marcus to structure it clean. Preferred shares, super voting rights, anti-dilution protection, a conduct clause tied to executive misuse and reputational harm. Vanessa signed everything 3 days later, exhausted and grateful, believing the rescue came from a private fund that admired her leadership. She hugged me that night and cried into my shirt because payroll cleared. I held her and said nothing. In the back seat of the town car, my phone buzzed again. Marcus had sent the first confirmation. The trust had moved. The motel room near O'Hare smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee, the kind of place nobody chooses unless he needs walls that do not ask questions. I set my phone on the desk, placed my wallet beside it, then stood under the yellow ceiling light while the silence settled around me. For the first time that night, there was no music, no cameras, no Vanessa turning pain into a performance. Just a humming heater under the window and the steady pulse of incoming emails. Marcus did not waste words. He never had. The first message confirmed the transfer of voting control back to Caldwell Silent Trust. The second froze Vanessa's restricted shares pending board review. The third scheduled an emergency governance meeting for 7:30 the next morning. Clean, quiet, legal. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the carpet while the past arranged itself in a line. The worst part was not that Vanessa had humiliated me in public. It was that the line had sounded rehearsed. I had heard echoes of it for months in smaller rooms. At a charity luncheon in May, she introduced me as Ethan, who keeps himself busy. At a rooftop dinner in July, she told a donor I was not built for executive pressure. In September, when Chad asked if I still did anything with finance, Vanessa laughed and said, "He understands enough to stay out of the way." Each sentence had landed softly enough for me to pretend it was harmless. That is how disrespect grows. Not like a thunderstorm, like a leak behind drywall. Quiet, hidden, expensive by the time you notice the stain. But 2 weeks before the gala, I stopped pretending. I had come home early from a meeting in Evanston and found Vanessa's tablet open on the kitchen island. I was not looking for secrets. The screen was already awake, glowing beside a half-empty glass of sparkling water and a folder marked board optics. My name sat in the middle of the page like a stain. There were notes about framing me as emotionally unstable if the marriage ended. There were bullet points about making me leave first. There was one line from Chad that made the room go cold around me. Break him in public, and he will walk away with nothing. I remember standing there with my keys still in my hand, listening to the refrigerator hum, feeling something inside me become very still. I did not confront her. I photographed the screen, sent it to Marcus, and closed the tablet exactly as I found it. That night, Vanessa came home smiling and kissed my cheek like nothing in the world had shifted. I smiled back, not because I believed her, because the final test had already begun. By 3 in the morning, the motel window had turned into a black mirror, and my reflection looked calmer than I felt. I had not slept. I had watched the documents arrive one by one, each email landing with the quiet weight of a door locking. Board notice, share restriction, conduct review, preservation order. The language was dry, almost boring, and that was what made it powerful. No insults, no threats, no begging to be understood. Just clauses Vanessa had signed when she thought paperwork was only something other people had to fear. Marcus called at 3:17. His voice sounded awake, pressed, and careful, like a man walking across thin ice he had already measured. He told me the board packet was complete. He told me the gala recording had been secured from the hotel vendor and from Vantage Pearl's own event archive. He told me the microphones had caught the sentence clearly, along with Chad's laugh and 2 minutes of conversation afterward where Vanessa tried to turn it into a joke for the donors closest to the stage. Then he paused. Marcus rarely paused. "Ethan," he said, "there is more." I looked at the ring on the desk beside the motel phone. Under that tired lamp, it did not look sacred anymore. It looked small. Marcus explained that the internal finance review had already flagged 3 vendor contracts connected to Chad Mercer. Consulting fees, brand strategy retainers, crisis messaging invoices, clean names on dirty math. Nothing dramatic enough for a movie, but plenty serious enough for a boardroom. Nearly $600,000 had moved through firms with mailing addresses in 2 different strip malls outside Naperville. The money had not gone to romance or scandal. It had gone to influence, image management, narrative control, paying people to make Vanessa look untouchable and to make me look irrelevant if the marriage cracked open. That detail should have broken something in me. Instead, it confirmed what the silence had been trying to teach me for years. She was not just drifting away. She was building an exit with my shadow as the villain. I asked Marcus what came next. He said, at 7:30, they vote to suspend her authority pending full review. At 8:15, building access changes. At 9, she either attends the meeting or we proceed without her. I nodded even though he could not see me. Outside, a shuttle bus hissed past the motel entrance, carrying travelers toward flights and ordinary mornings. My morning would not be ordinary. I showered, shaved, and put the same navy suit back on. The white mark where my ring had been looked almost too bright against my skin. Before I left, I placed the ring inside an envelope and wrote Vanessa's name across the front. Not with anger, with finality. Some men raise their voices when they finally understand the truth. I lowered mine. At 6:45 in the morning, Chicago looked unfinished. All gray light, wet pavement, and office towers waiting for people to fill them with noise. I rode downtown in silence with the envelope resting on my knee. The driver kept the radio low, just traffic reports and weather, 29 degrees near the lake, delays on the Kennedy. Nothing about a marriage ending inside a moving car. That felt right. The largest collapses rarely make sound at first. They begin with one signature. One locked account. One door that does not open anymore. At 7:22, I walked into Vantage Pearl Media through the private entrance on LaSalle Street. The security guard, Paul, looked up from his desk and straightened like he was not sure which version of me had arrived. For years, I had come in carrying coffee trays, forgotten chargers, garment bags, things Vanessa needed but did not want to remember needing. That morning, Paul stood and said, "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell." Not Ethan. Not sir as an afterthought. Mr. Caldwell. Someone had updated the system. I took the elevator to the 26th floor, watching the numbers climb in clean white light. With every floor, another year seemed to fall away. The apartment with the folding desk. The kitchen table covered in invoices. The first office tour where Vanessa squeezed my hand and whispered, "We did it." We. That little word had once held a whole future. The elevator opened to glass walls, pale oak floors, and the quiet panic of employees pretending not to know something was wrong. Assistants moved quickly. Legal folders waited outside the conference room. The company logo glowed behind the reception desk, silver letters against white stone, polished enough to hide fingerprints. Marcus stood near the boardroom door in a charcoal suit, tablet in one hand, reading glasses low on his nose. He looked at the envelope in my hand and said nothing. That was why I trusted him. He understood the difference between evidence and grief. Inside, 7 board members sat around the long walnut table. No one smiled. No one needed to. The screen at the front displayed the meeting title in plain black letters, Emergency Governance Review. My seat was at the head of the table. I did not take it right away. I stood behind the chair and looked out over the city Vanessa loved to pose above. Then Marcus began. He walked them through the trust documents, the preferred share structure, the conduct clause, the restricted stock conditions, and the overnight transfer of voting authority. Each slide was simple. Each fact landed flat and final. At 7:58, the board voted. At 8:15, Vanessa's access changed. At 8:21, my phone lit up with her name for the first time since the gala. I let it ring. Vanessa arrived at 8:34, 17 minutes after her badge stopped working. I saw her through the glass wall before she saw me, standing at reception in last night's white dress under a camel coat, her hair pinned carefully enough to suggest she had not slept, only repaired the visible damage. She tapped her key card against the reader once. Nothing. Twice. Still nothing. The small red light blinked like a verdict. Paul stepped from behind the desk, polite and uncomfortable, and I watched her face shift from irritation to confusion to something close to fear. She said something I could not hear. Paul pointed toward the boardroom. That was when her eyes found me through the glass. For a second, neither of us moved. 14 years can fit inside one look if the room is quiet enough. Then she walked toward the conference room with her chin lifted, the way she did when cameras were near. Chad Mercer followed 5 steps behind her, wearing a navy overcoat and the same grin he had worn the night before, only thinner now, stretched across worry. Marcus opened the door before Vanessa could touch the handle. "Good morning," he said. "Please come in." She ignored him and looked straight at me. "What is this?" Her voice was sharp, but not steady. I placed the envelope with her name on the table and slid it across the walnut surface. It stopped in front of the empty chair beside her. "Something you left behind," I said. She opened it, saw the ring, and for the first time since I had known her, Vanessa Caldwell had no prepared expression ready. Her fingers closed around the envelope slowly. Chad leaned toward her and whispered, "Do not react." That was the mistake. Marcus tapped his tablet, and the screen changed to the gala transcript. The sentence appeared in black text on white background. Then came Chad's laugh, captured clearly in the event audio. Nobody in the room laughed now. Vanessa looked at the board, then back at me. "You cannot punish me for one sentence," she said. I did not raise my voice. "No." But the sentence opened the door. Marcus moved to the next slide. Board optics. Make him leave first. Frame. Emotional instability. Use donor witnesses. Then Chad's line appeared beneath it. Break him in public, and he will walk away with nothing. The room went colder. Chad straightened. That is taken out of context, he said, but his voice landed weak and late. Marcus did not argue. He opened the next document. Vendor payments. Consulting invoices. Crisis messaging retainers. Addresses. Dates. Amounts. Vanessa's face lost color piece by piece, not all at once, but like lights shutting off down a hallway. She turned to me and whispered, "Ethan, you cannot do this to me." I looked at the woman I had protected so carefully that she mistook protection for weakness. "I did not do this to you," I said. "You signed every document that made this possible." For a moment, nobody touched the air. The boardroom stayed silent except for the low hum of the ventilation system and the soft click of Marcus moving through exhibits on his tablet. That was the part people never understand about consequences. They expect shouting. They expect tears. They expect someone to sweep papers off a table and make a scene big enough to hide the truth inside it. But real consequences often arrive dressed like routine business. A resolution number. A seconded motion. A vote recorded in the minutes. Vanessa stood at the far end of the table with the envelope in her hand, the ring hidden inside like a small piece of history that no longer knew where it belonged. Chad tried to speak again, but Chairwoman Elaine Porter lifted one hand without looking at him. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "you will wait until counsel has finished." One sentence. Calm as glass. It cut through him cleaner than anger ever could. Marcus continued. The consulting firms had not performed the work described in their invoices. The crisis messaging plans referenced a potential marital separation before Vanessa had ever mentioned one to me. One memo outlined donor talking points in case I challenged the company structure. Another suggested portraying me as a dependent spouse with no operational knowledge. I looked at the screen and felt an old sadness move through me, slow and cold. She had not just wanted to leave. She had wanted to rewrite the years I carried her until even I looked like dead weight in my own story. Elaine called for the formal vote. Vanessa shook her head once. "This is unnecessary," she said, softer now. "We can discuss this privately." I almost answered, but I did not need to. The room had already stopped belonging to our marriage. It belonged to the record. One by one, the board members voted to suspend her authority pending the full audit, remove Chad from operational access, freeze discretionary executive spending, and appoint an interim leadership committee. The words landed without drama. Suspended. Removed. Frozen. Appointed. For clean cuts on white paper. Chad's badge was collected by security at the door. No one touched him. No one raised a voice. He simply handed over a piece of plastic that had made him feel important, and the feeling left with it. Vanessa watched him go, and for the first time, I saw her understand that charm did not work on locked systems. After he disappeared into the elevator lobby, she turned back to me. "What happens to me now?" she asked. The question was not legal. It was human, and that made it harder. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and looked at the skyline beyond the glass. "That is up to the audit," I said. "The marriage is up to my attorney." Marcus handed Elaine the prepared public statement. It said nothing about betrayal, nothing about humiliation, nothing about the sentence that had emptied 14 years from my hand. Just leadership transition due to breach of governance. Clean. Boring. Final. Vanessa looked down at the envelope again, and I could tell she wanted me to take the ring back, not because she loved what it meant, but because she finally understood what it had protected. I walked to the door without reaching for it. Behind me, her voice broke into a whisper. "Ethan." I stopped, but I did not turn around. Some names sound different when they arrive too late. Then I left her in the room with the documents, the board, and the silence she had earned. 2 weeks later, Chicago looked different from 30,000 feet. Smaller, quieter, like a city could shrink once it stopped holding your pain. I did not go home. After the board meeting, Marcus handled the house, the filings, the accounts, the careful legal language people use when a life has to be separated without turning it into a spectacle. I packed what mattered into 2 suitcases and 1 cardboard box. My father's watch, 3 photo albums, old tax records, a Wisconsin deed, and a coffee mug from the first office Vanessa ever rented. I almost left the mug behind. Then I realized memory does not become poison just because someone else mishandled it. Some things were real before they were ruined. I flew east, rented a truck in Portland, Maine, and drove north along roads lined with pine trees and frozen shoulders of snow. By dusk, I reached a small coastal town where the Atlantic came in gray and restless, slapping against rocks like it had somewhere important to be. There was an old boat repair shop for sale near the harbor, 1,200 square feet, peeling blue paint, rusted hinges, a crooked sign that swung in the wind. It was not impressive. That was the point. I bought it through a local bank, not the trust, not a holding company, not a structure hidden behind clean paperwork. Just my name, Ethan Caldwell. For the first time in years, that felt like enough. The audit at Vantage Pearl took 4 months. Vanessa resigned before the final report reached the press. Chad disappeared into another city with a new title and fewer references. The public statement stayed cold and bloodless, exactly as Marcus had written it. Governance failure. Leadership transition. Internal controls review. No one outside that boardroom ever heard the sentence that started it. I preferred it that way. Revenge makes noise. Freedom does not have to. 6 months later, I approved the sale of the trust's controlling position into an employee stock ownership plan. Marcus thought I would hesitate. I did not. The people who answered phones, built campaigns, edited invoices, booked rooms, and stayed late fixing other people's mistakes deserved more of that company than the woman who had used it like a mirror. When the transfer closed, I sat in the boat shop with sawdust on my jeans and coffee going cold beside me, watching rain slide down the window in thin silver lines. That afternoon, Vanessa sent her first email without a lawyer copied. The subject line was my name. The message was only 5 sentences. She said she was sorry. She said she had lost herself. She said she wanted to explain. She said she missed who we used to be. She asked where I had gone. I read it once. Then I closed the laptop. Some doors do not need to be slammed. They only need to remain closed. Spring came slowly to Maine. The mornings smelled like salt, cedar, and engine oil. I learned the names of fishermen who did not care about board seats or gala lights. I fixed small motors, replaced cracked hull panels, and went home tired in a way that felt honest. At night, I could hear the harbor bells moving in the wind. No applause. No cameras. No one measuring my worth by the woman beside me or the room I could command. Just quiet. Clean, earned quiet. Vanessa had once looked across a ballroom and told the world what she thought of me. So I removed myself from her stage, took back the power she mistook for her own, and vanished into a life she could no longer enter. Not because I was broken, because I was finally free.